I think we're live. Yep, we are. What is up, people of the internet? It is me, Real American, back in with another live stream. Yep, we are live with another town hall reaction. The Mike Pence town hall is about to begin in a couple minutes on CNN. Just like every other time, I cannot show the feed because CNN is, well, restricting the footage. So about that, folks. You will, however, be able to hear the audio. I hope everyone's having a phenomenal day, night, afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I certainly am. I'm still having... I'm still trying to recover from yesterday's reaction. So, if I'm out of it a little bit, I'm sorry. I still cannot fathom what we witnessed yesterday with the Chris Christie town hall. I mean, I just don't know what to say. That was awful. So, yeah. Just certainly our stream of our time yesterday. Now, before we continue with today's video, I hope you enjoy these or if you enjoy these type of live streams, I hope you do. Smash the like button down below. Subscribe, share with your friends, hit that little bell, follow the Twitter accounts in the description down below. Guys, go follow Real American Politics on Twitter. It is a great Twitter account everyone should follow. Of course, follow the Rumble page down below for exclusive content. And of course, join the channel today. Guys, I hope everybody joins the channel. And I hope everyone, if you have questions, make sure you send them through Super Chats. Or of course, if you want to just ask through the regular chat, your answer will more than likely be answered. But all the support's appreciated, and I hope you guys enjoy. Witness me suffer at whatever this town hall is going to be. Yay. Yes, I saw the buffet edit of Trump. That was funny. Well, what Trump posted on Truth Social. So yeah, this should certainly be a fascinating stream. Of course, if you do got super chats or questions, I will not answer right away. May take a little bit because I'm not going to interrupt Pence. Because unlike Chris Christie, Pence is at least a bit more reasonable. Oh gosh, another one. Yeah, I may lose my sanity tonight. I don't know if you've seen it, but America First or Jackson Laymeyer. Yeah, I know who he is. He expressed interest in running for Kevin Hern's seat. Really? I mean, Kevin Hurt's pretty okay. He's a pretty solid congressman. Like a solid B plus tier congressman. Ben Siddix for 2. What will happen with the coming indictment? I honestly don't know. Honestly, I cannot say. I gotta wait till the indictment drops. I think this is... I think this may be a mistake on DOJ, though. We just gotta see. I cannot make any comment on it right now. Because... we've never seen a DOJ go after a president before. Do a Pence impression, please. That's impossible. Are you scared by Chris Christie? I'm scared that I will lose any sanity that I have because apparently we're doing another town hall next week. Chris Christie is going on CNN next week with another town hall. So yeah, chat, we're going to be reacting to that. I don't know what to say. Thoughts on Lee Zeldin versus Kirsten Gillibrand? I don't think that's going to happen. I think Zeldin's waiting. The town hall is about to start, so yay. Who is ready to watch Mike Pence on CNN? Woo! I'm not going to lose my sanity at all tonight. Jeez. Chris Vember. Yeah, so Pence is in now. Not a surprise.
Good evening and welcome to
okay, can't play this part, the music. I'm sorry. The music cannot be played because I don't want to get copyrighted. When's Vivek Town Hall? I don't know. I would assume soon. I think he's going to Town Hall eventually, but Zeldin should not run again against Gillibrand because she's extremely popular. Not really. Nobody knows who Gillibrand is in New York compared to, like, Schumer. So, I'm just saying don't run again and focus on building up, like, early vote stuff. Doug Vember. No, not that again. No more Doug Vember. I fell for that trap once, not falling for again. Alright.
Who wins the
Okay, come on, stop playing the music, dear Lord. It wasn't facing Kevin Hart in a primary, it was expressing interest in once he retires. Then I'll support him. Liam Myers is a pretty good guy. I think he follows me on Twitter, right? I don't know. Pretty good guy, though. Okay. I think this is essentially the same exact crowd as Nikki Haley, so be prepared for some quote-unquote Republicans in this crowd. The ones especially about the environmental questions. I can't get over that, but... Should America be smaller or bigger than Chris Christie? I'm not even going to answer that. That was stupid. Kansas trending blue with demographics. Parts of it. You think Ramaswamy will get an administration position if Trump wins? I think he gets one either way if a Republican wins. I'm losing trust of him, but, we just got to see. That gives me a weird vibe. I don't think I could trust him. That's what I'm thinking. And he's here. Here's Pence. Let's go. Woo! Mike Pence.
Hello, sir.
Hooray.
Thank you. Good to see you. Would you like to have a seat? First, let's get down to business. Happy birthday. What a way to spend your birthday.
Quite a way. It's one for the books.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yay,
so
pencil
I mentioned this, a
time.
vice president running against a president he served with is incredibly unusual. It hasn't happened in modern history. Why did you decide to run against your former boss?
Well, first off, thank you, Dana. Thank you to CNN
Pencil's
for
here.
hosting this town hall, and thank you to all the good people of Iowa for the warm welcome tonight. It's a real privilege for Karen and I to be with you and to come here to the first in the nation state to announce my intention to seek the Republican nomination for President of the United States. We wanted to do it here
Pencil time.
in Iowa.
No cringe. Oh, wait, that's not that bad.
Dana, my reasons for running. First, look, I love this country. America's been so good to our family. My grandfather immigrated from Ireland. He went through Ellis Island. I was named
He's Irish,
after
of
him.
course.
My dad was a combat veteran. My mom and dad built everything that matters. A family, a business, and a good name. We really lived the American dream, and I was raised to believe you give back. And I had the opportunity to do that. We met in the years that I was in the Congress of the United States when I was a leader among House conservatives. I was governor of the state of Indiana. It was my great privilege to be vice president of the United States. But the opportunities that we've had to serve, the experience that we've developed informed very much our sense of calling in this moment, because I'm running because I think this country's in a lot of trouble.
Michael Pencil.
I think President Joe Biden and the Democrats have weakened America at home and abroad. And literally, we have a crisis at our border. We have inflation at a 40-year high. We have a crime wave in our cities.
Okay, he's focused on
And
the
frankly,
issues
that
matter.
disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan has
All right.
emboldened the enemies of freedom around the world. Now more than ever, I think
That's
those
one
of us
cringe.
that have the experience to bring back real change and to put America back on a track of common sense, conservative principles, have a responsibility to step forward. And that's
He
why I'm
sounds
running
like
for
Smokey
president
Hunter's
of the United
crack pipe.
States.
And we're going to get to a lot of those issues, but I want to talk
Not a
about
bad start
something
so
you
far.
mentioned more than one time in your kickoff speech today. You said that on January 6th, you, quote, chose the Constitution over Donald Trump, and, quote, now voters will face the same choice. So just to be clear, are you saying that a vote for Donald Trump is a vote against the Constitution?
Well, I've said many times, including on this network and others, and in the book that I wrote last fall,
Nobody
January
read that.
6th was a tragic day. But thanks to the courage of law enforcement, the violence was quelled. We were able to reconvene the Congress the very same day and complete the work of the American people under the Constitution. And I'll always believe that by God's
I'm not a
grace, I
Pence
did my
bro.
duty that day
I'm not.
to support and defend the Constitution
add
of the United
cringe.
States and the oath that I had taken. But as I said today in my remarks, I felt it was important as we launched this campaign to understand the President and I had a difference in the past, and that hasn't changed. But also there are profound differences about the future of this country and the future of the Republican Party that I articulated today. But when the President asserted that I had the right to overturn the election, I said today that I felt that he was He was asking
You
me to
two,
choose
this is
between
not
him
me.
and
This
the
is Mike
Constitution.
Pence.
I chose the Constitution, and I always will.
Okay,
It was a difficult day. I had frankly hoped the president would come around in the years since and see that we had done our duty under the Constitution to preside
that's not what the Constitution
over
says,
the
but
count of the electoral
whatever.
vote as dictated by our founders, but it's not to be. I said today President Trump was wrong then, he's wrong now. But I truly do believe that it's important to remember that those of us that would take the oath of office to serve as President of the United States really make one promise above all others, and that is to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And I pledge to the people of Iowa and the people of America that if you give me that great privilege, I will always stand on the Constitution of the United States of America.
That's not even what Trump said or that's not even what the Constitution says.
Sir, I wanna
But
go to the
okay,
audience.
whatever.
We have a question on this issue. Meet Keaton Nugren. He's a law student from Johnstown who previously interned for Senator Joni Ernst. Keaton.
Very good.
Hi, Mr. Vice President. My question is, are you prepared to push back against the former president on allegations you could have overturned the 2020
It's
election?
YouTube.
Well, Keaton, I would refer you to my speech today to answer that question.
Oh,
The answer
that's
is
an
yes.
awful answer.
Because I think it's important. And not that I didn't think there were irregularities in the
All right,
2020
Judge,
election. I did. And I said so on that fateful day. I had concerns that there were half a dozen states that had changed the rules
Okay,
in the name
YouTube?
of COVID
YouTube,
that
I'm
had
not here.
undermined public confidence
YouTube, I'm not here.
in our elections. But once states had certified those elections, once the courts had reviewed them, once the Congress had considered any objections,
I mean, that's not an awful
I
answer.
knew my duty
but-
was clear. The Constitution states clearly that the job of the Vice President as President of the Senate is to preside over a joint session of Congress where the Electoral
It's
College
not that
votes
bad
are
of an answer.
opened and counted. It says they shall be opened and they shall be counted. And we did that. And I want the American people to know that I believe with all my heart that we did our duty that day. The Bible says he keeps his oath even when it hurts, and I know something about that. I know the disappointment of the 2020 election. You remember I was on the ballot, right? But at the end of the day, I think
know
the
YouTube
Republican
changed
Party has
policy,
to
but
be
I'm
the
still
party of
being
the
careful.
Constitution.
I'm just
We've had
careful.
enough of Democrats trampling on our constitutional rights. We've had enough of Democrats wanting to pack the court, do away with the Second Amendment, trample our religious freedom. So now more than ever, I think the American people need to be able to look to the Republican Party and say, that will be a party whose leaders are all men and women that are dedicated to preserving, protecting, and
awful,
defending
but it's a little bit
the
cringy.
Constitution of the
sir,
United States.
Sir, on that, Donald Trump says he is, quote, inclined to pardon many members of the mob who attacked the Capitol on January 6th. Those people were, of course, part of the same mob who built gallows and chanted about wanting to hang you. Would you consider pardoning,
Okay, I'm sorry.
pardoning
That's
any of them?
stupid.
You know, on the day of January 6th, I issued a tweet demanding that people leave the Capitol and end the violence. And I said that those that failed to do that should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And I continue to believe that today. We cannot ever allow what happened on January 6th to happen again in the heart
Yeah, but a lot of
our
people get
democracy.
prosecuted improperly.
And I'll stand by the decisions and the due
Double
process
cringe.
of court in our laws. And I have no interest or no intention
Issued a
of
tweet.
pardoning those that assaulted police officers or vandalized our Capitol. They need to be answerable to the law.
Sir, I want to ask about some breaking news. Tonight, the Justice Department recently informed Donald Trump's legal team that he is a target of a federal investigation into possibly mishandling classified documents.
I don't know what's happening.
I should say you were cleared last week in your own documents case. What's your reaction to the news about your former boss?
Well, let me say the handling of classified materials is a very serious matter. And that was why after the revelation at its residence and the revelations at the former president's residence, I took it upon myself to review our files. And we uncovered a small number of documents that had been inadvertently transferred to our residence in Indiana. I immediately informed the Department of Justice, and I'm
Yeah, can you
grateful
talk with something else,
after our
please?
full cooperation that they
Anything?
concluded that it was an innocent
Full
mistake.
cooperation. Do you see his case as different?
But let me say this. Look, I don't know the facts of the president's case. I don't know the facts of the former president's case. But what we've got to have in this country is equal treatment under the law. Dana, you may not know that. I mean, I was very troubled last summer when for the first time in history, there was a search warrant executed at the home of a former president of the United States. Shirley, you know all the years I served on the Judiciary
That's
Committee.
actually
That's
a
when you and I
decent
first
answer.
met. There had to be dozens of ways that could have been handled other than that kind of behavior. I mean, when I informed the Department of Justice that we had classified materials potentially in our home, they were at my home. The FBI was on my front doorstep the next day.
But isn't
And
the
what we
difference?
found out was that when Joe Biden apparently alerted the Department of Justice, 80 days later,
But sir,
they showed up at his office. That's not
That's actually a
equal
good answer.
treatment
Sir,
under the law,
sir,
and
I
we've got to
understand-
end.
I
this
understand you're
two-tier
talking
system
about
of justice.
equal
That's not a
treatment,
bad answer.
But the
I mean,
question is,
can't really say much more.
allegation that an investigation into obstruction, which you clearly did not do, if that is something that investigators see as possible, even enough potentially to indict the former president, do you think that
The
that
search
should
warrant.
go forward?
Well, I would hope not. I really would, Dana. I mean, there's several reasons for that. Number one is I think it would be terribly divisive to the country.
I mean,
At
that's
a
not
time when
bad.
the American people are hurting, I mean to tell you, families are struggling right now with record inflation. We have a crisis at our
New
border,
York
the
is
likes of which
orange.
we've never seen. We have a flood of fentanyl coming into every city, large and small, in this country that's killing young people every day. We have threats
Why is he
abroad,
breathing?
a
Is that
crime
just
wave in
me?
our cities.
Is he breathing like
I think
every
now
other
more than ever,
sentence?
we ought to be finding ways we could actually come
And,
together.
sir, we're going to get
and
to
this
all
kind of this kind of action by the Department of Justice, I think, would only fuel further division in the country. And let me also say, I think it would also send a terrible message to the wider world. I mean, we're the emblem of democracy. We're the symbol of justice in the
I
world.
hate when they
And
talk about democracy.
the serious matter, which has already happened once in New York, of indicting a former president of the United States sends a terrible message to the world. I hope the DOJ
It's
thinks
full of
better
Trump.
of it and resolves these issues without an indictment.
Sir, I just want to clarify, what you're saying is that if they believe he committed a crime, they should not go forward with an indictment? You just talked before about
No, look-
committing to the rule of law.
Let me be clear that no one's above the law.
Okay.
But with regard to the unique
He's breathing air
circumstances
for
here,
Canada.
look, I had no business having classified documents in my
Then why do you
residence,
have them?
and I took full responsibility for it. President Biden had no business having them in his residence from when he was vice president as well. And the same with former President Trump.
Most shining city.
But I would just hope that there would be a way
Yeah, it's all about Trump.
for them
I
to
want to hear
move
something
forward
different.
without the dramatic and drastic and divisive step of indicting a former president of the United States. We've got to find a way to move our country forward and restore confidence in equal treatment under the law in this country. We really do.
I mean, it's not a bad answer.
Sir,
you know,
if Donald Trump
it's not
if
bad.
Donald Trump is convicted of a crime and you're elected president, would you pardon him?
Well, I don't want to speak about hypotheticals. I'm not sure I'm going to be elected president of the United States.
Bro, that's...
But I believe we have a fighting chance. I really believe we do.
And if you are,
And I would hope, again, Dana,
It's
you're
boring, but
as,
it's like the only thing
persistent
you
as
can
ever.
say without pissing anybody off.
CNN is living up to its reputation. But there are real issues the American people are facing. And rather than talking about that, I want to talk about what the people here in Iowa
That's
are
actually-
talking about, which is
okay.
the failed policies. of
Pence,
Biden.
I'll give it Pence. I'll give it to Pence on that. That's
We
pretty
need
good.
for us to have new leadership in the White House
yeah,
and in our party.
we have a
That's
lot
really
of questions
good.
to get to. Just to be clear, you did
Yeah, I
talk
don't hate
about a lot
Pence.
of
I just
these
don't-
issues
not the
in
biggest
your
fan of him.
speech. But I do want to go to the audience. I want to talk about the issue of inflation, something that is top of mind for Americans. Scott Math, you are somebody who works in hospitality, a board chair of the Iowa Hotel and Lodging Association, and a Republican from Des Moines. Scott.
Thank you very much, and welcome back to Iowa. Vice President Pence.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, he
And
did
as she
CNN.
said, my question does evolve around inflation and how it is impacting our businesses and Main Street.
Right.
As a father of a recent
I don't
college
support
graduate,
Pence, so I-
and she's
oh,
embarking
Pence, I should
on
say.
her new life on her own, is commenting on the incredible prices of groceries at the grocery store and making decisions, fresh fruit or processed. What policies or plans will you champion in order to get the cost
I can't
of
show
these
CNN 'cause of the
necessities
licensing.
back in line?
Right. What's your daughter's name?
Her name is Rachel.
Well, give Rachel our congratulations on graduating from college. She's sitting right behind you.
Yeah, exactly.
Well done. Good luck.
Can you show a slow court? I can't. I'm not going to legally. I'm not going to mess with it.
Look, I'm so glad you're focused on this issue because inflation's at a 40-year high. And it all started when President Joe Biden and the Democrats passed a $2 trillion bill in the name of COVID that lit the pilot light of the worst inflation that we've seen in 2 generations. I mean, it was completely unnecessary spending, and they knew it. You know, I'm proud of everything that we did during our administration to come alongside families and businesses in the midst of the worst pandemic in 100 years. But here, these Democrats came in and they just used the excuse of COVID for a gusher of spending and a wish list of liberal policy priorities, and American families have been paying the price, Scott, ever since. Well, the first thing we need to do, we need to get federal spending under control. I think we ought to impose a freeze on all non-defense discretionary spending across the board, and we ought to turn off all that unnecessary COVID spending in its entirety.
Mr. Pence.
Secondly, and I want to say that, secondly, I think we got to get the Federal Reserve back to doing its job, which is protecting the currency. 10 years ago, when I was in the Congress, I authored a bill that ended what it's called the dual mandate. We actually asked the Federal Reserve to focus on protecting the value of the dollar and full employment. You know, we ought to look to the president, we ought to look to the Congress to promote policies that ensure full employment. All right, we've been passing the buck to the Fed for too long. Let them protect the dollar, and let's hold our political leaders to account for keeping Americans working.
I just want to circle back to something you said about spending.
Yeah.
You did urge Congress to pass stimulus legislation during the coronavirus pandemic.
Sure did.
Several Republicans, including one of your rivals, Nikki Haley, when she was right here on the stage Sunday, criticized that spending. Was it a mistake, especially given what you just said?
You know, I'll always be proud of what the American people did during the course of the worst pandemic in 100 years. The end of February 2020, President Trump asked me to lead the White House Coronavirus Task Force. And one of the things I did immediately, he had a group of scientists that were working and specialists in the area, some of whom became quite famous. But I immediately added economic officials, the Secretary of Agriculture, our economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, the Treasury Secretary, because I knew in advising the president, we would have to make sure he understood what the cost of the economy would be to what we had done. And I must tell you, I think all along the way, sure, are there lessons to be learned for the day that this happens again in America?
No.
Absolutely.
Is spending
And I'm
one of
willing to
them?
look at those lessons.
It probably won't happen.
But
again.
I got to tell you, the way we did the
Hopefully.
Paycheck Protection Program,
Never
I think
again, hopefully.
saved tens of millions of jobs all across this country, including here in Iowa. And I believe the help that we provided to American families was absolutely essential. And again, I'll always be proud of what the American people accomplished, but I'll always be open to learning what lessons we could learn.
Let's go back to the audience. I want you to meet Mary Landheis.
Hi, Mary.
She's a mom and president of 2 manufacturing companies here in Iowa.
Wow.
She's a Republican from Clarinda who serves on the State Workforce Development Board. Mary.
All right, very good. First of all, I wanted to say thank you for your service and happy birthday. So,
Thank you, Mary.
you're welcome.
Very kind.
I have a very brief question. I just want you to share your thoughts on abortion.
Ooh. This
You know, Mary, I'm pro-life. I don't apologize for it.
This is where Pence is good at. This is Pence's strength right here. His bread and butter.
You know, when Karen and I were running for Congress 20 years ago, our kids were 4, 5, and 6. And I remember we looked at them and we were trying to explain to our children why we were selling our dream house, moving to our hometown, going to spend all of our savings and uproot our lives to run for Congress. And my wife
better
Karen
than
looked at our little
DeSantis.
ones
No.
and said, "It's for the babies." In all my time in Congress, I stood for the right to life. I authored the first legislation to defund Planned Parenthood ever to pass the Congress of the United States.
He's going down.
When I was governor of Indiana, we not only stood for the right to life, but we promoted
Yeah, I'm
adoption
reducing
reform
cringe.
because I believe if you're going to be pro-life, you need to be pro-adoption.
That's good. That's
But
really
I will tell
good.
you, Mary, I couldn't be more proud to have been vice president in an administration that appointed 3 of the justices that sent Roe versus Wade to the ash heap of history where it belongs and gave America a new beginning for life.
It's going down.
But now,
This is a first,
I
everybody.
think now it's incumbent on us as Americans to bring both principle and compassion to this cause. Many states, I'm proud to say, have advanced pro-life legislation. But we have a long way to go to win the hearts and minds of the American people. But I think that showing compassion and sensitivity and respect for one another, coming alongside women in crisis pregnancies, as my wife Karen and I have sought to do in crisis pregnancy centers around the country, is the way to do that. But I promise you, Mary, I've had 64 times around the sun,
Let him cook.
however more
Yeah.
times I get. Me and my family, we will not rest or relent until we restore the sanctity of life to the center of American law in every state in the country.
Keeps going down.
Should any federal abortion ban also include exceptions for rape, incest, and the
Race?
life of the mother?
I know she meant rape, but
Well, those are exceptions that I've always supported, Dana, as you know. I'm a strong supporter of the Hyde Amendment when I was in the Congress of the United States, which coincidentally, President Joe Biden was too. For years and years, he opposed taxpayer funding of abortion.
we get
under
negative.
the
I
Hyde
don't think that's
Amendment.
possible.
But
Only Trump
recognize those
has.
exceptions in those matters. But the truth is, he abandoned that. He abandoned all of his position. And the truth is, as Republicans debate this issue in states around the country today, it's always important to remember that the Democrat Party's position is abortion on demand with taxpayer dollars all the way up to the moment of
Yes!
birth. And as we talk about the possibility of a national standard, say a 15-week standard,
Come on, Pence,
which would
keep
put America
cooking.
more in line with most of the European Union. Most of the European countries have either a 12 to 15-week rule on abortion. Our laws today are more in line with China, Iran, and North Korea.
Keep hitting that.
And for
Come
my
on,
part,
Pence.
if I have the great privilege to serve as President of the United States, I'll support the cause of life at every level, the state level, the local level, with taxpayer dollars, and at the national level.
And just the person you're running against, or you want to run against if you get the nomination, is President Biden. He says that codifying Roe versus Wade is his position. That means a right to an abortion until the point of viability, not up until birth. But I want to ask you one further question on this. Do you think that states that ban abortion have a responsibility to financially support women who give birth to a child they didn't plan to have or maybe can't afford? For example, do you support paid family leave or subsidizing childcare?
Well, look, this is what I mean when I talk about compassion. The state of Texas recently passed a very strong pro-life bill.
Come on, Pence.
But what they got no credit for at all was that in the same bill, they approved $100 million in new funding for women in crisis pregnancies and for newborn care. That's the model for the future. I truly do believe that if we're going to stand for life, we have to care as much about newborns and mothers as we do about the unborn, and we ought to be providing support to women who bring children into the world.
That's
and we
zero.
ought to
He's
come
done
on.
it.
Does that include paid family leave?
That's good.
Does that include paid family leave, subsidizing childcare?
Well, we advanced that principle in the administration for federal officials. And look, I wouldn't stop there. I mean, I got to tell you, it's states around the country that continue to advance the cause of life.
Come on, keep cooking.
I think are demonstrating a great generosity of the American people. And I want to be a part of it. Principle and compassion is the way to move forward and advance the cause of life here in
Pence.
Iowa, back in Indiana, and all across America.
Sir, let's go back to the audience.
That was awesome.
This is
You know
Michael
what?
Banks. He's a retired
what?
photographer
For that,
who worked at a local
he's a
TV station
-5.
here in Iowa.
That was
He's
awesome.
a Republican from Des Moines. Michael?
Hello, Mr.
He's a
Vice
negative.
President. My question is, what is your view of the current situation in Ukraine?
Oh boy.
And what do you see as a resolution
This could be a
to this
problem.
conflict?
Well, thank you, Michael. Thanks for the question. Look, I know that some in this debate have called
Negative
the war in
cringe.
Ukraine a territorial dispute. It's not.
Oh, Pence,
It
come
was a Russian
on.
invasion, an unprovoked Russian invasion. And I believe the United States of America needs to continue to provide the courageous soldiers in Ukraine with the
This is
resources they need
Pence.
to repel
No.
that Russian invasion and restore their territorial integrity. Look,
Pence, no.
Michael, we're the leader of the free world.
You are cooking.
We're the arsenal of democracy. I hold to what we used to call the Reagan Doctrine. President Reagan expressed it in a
Peace
State
through
of the Union address
strength.
back in 1985. He essentially said, look, our policy in the United States will be, if you're willing to fight the communists in your country, we'll give you the means to fight them there so we don't have to fight them here. And that's the policy that we've approached here. Now, I want to say President Joe
No.
Biden has been slow in providing military resources to Ukraine.
What?
I mean, they promised 33 Abrams tanks back in January. They're still waiting.
No.
We're waiting on F-16s to be transferred from somewhere. I mean, our administration ended what was a ban during the Obama-Biden administration on any military resources at all. We provided Javelin missiles. All they were providing was
You are cooking, Pence.
military meals and blankets. We corrected that, and Ukraine was better situated to be able to deal with this Russian invasion. But I want to tell you, I think it's in our national interest to make this fight, to give them the ability to fight and win against the Russians for two reasons. Number one, I've met Vladimir Putin. Okay,
Bro.
I've looked him right in the eye and told him things he didn't want to hear. Anybody that thinks that Vladimir Putin will stop if he overruns Ukraine has what we say back in Indiana, another think coming.
He's not.
He has
bro,
no intention
that
of
was
stopping.
awful.
He's made it clear that he wants to recreate that old Soviet
He
sphere of influence
can't.
in
He's
Eastern
not
Europe.
going to invade
And he
NATO
may very
countries.
soon cross
Stop
over into a
Vladimir Putin.
border where
Stop,
servicemen, men
Pence.
and women,
Stop.
like my son in the Marine Corps and my son-in-law in the Navy, would actually have to go and fight because he'd cross into a NATO ally. So that's
He's
first,
not going to.
is stopping Russian aggression and saying we're not going to allow
He's not gonna
Russia to
send-
redraw international
my
lines by force.
gosh.
But also, look, our greatest economic and strategic threat in the 21st century is China.
Oh, finally
And I
say
believe
that.
the most effective way to discourage China's increasing military aggression and ambitions in the Asia Pacific
Sir, I have some questions
is to
about that.
give the Ukrainians the ability to defeat Russia and drive
What
them out.
does-
That'll
what
send a
does
message to
Ukraine
China
have to do with
that we're not
China?
We're going
China.
to get to China in a moment,
military.
but I just have to ask about
Oh,
something
my
that your former
goodness.
boss, Donald Trump, said in his CNN town hall. He was asked whether he wanted Ukraine to win the war, and he would not say. What message does that send to Vladimir Putin?
Well, and frankly, when Vladimir Putin rolled into Ukraine, the former president called him a genius. I know the difference between a genius and a war criminal. And I know who
Why
needs
is
to
it,
win
if he's not doing any
in the war in
atrocities,
Ukraine. And
why
it's
does
the
it matter
people
to us?
fighting for their freedom and fighting to restore their national sovereignty
It's none of our
in Ukraine.
business.
And America,
if no
it's
atrocities
not our
are
war.
happening, why are we
freedom
here?
is
Why
our
are we
fight.
worried about it?
And we need to give
It
the
sucks people
people
are
of
dying.
Ukraine the
We
ability
should be
to fight
promoting
and defend
peace.
their freedom.
Not
You
constant
mentioned
war.
China. There have been a series of concerning military encounters between the U.S. and China in recent weeks, a near collision between warships in the Taiwan Strait, an aggressive intercept by a Chinese fighter jet. How would the Pence administration respond to such things?
Bro, 2000.
The Chinese communists only understand one thing, and that's strength. The truth is, the Biden administration has been busy cutting military spending. And one of my concerns about the recent debt ceiling
Criticizing
deal
Trump for calling.
was that once you factor in inflation, it actually represents a cut in military spending over the next year. I mean, China is floating a new battleship every month. We've seen the provocations both in the air and on the seas just in the last week alone. They've built islands that become military bases in the South China Sea. I mean, look, China has a desire to drive the United
We
States
should have had
out
a
of the
deep
Asia
breath counter.
Pacific.
We may.
And now more than ever, we need a president who will marshal the support of the Congress and of the American people to build a military fitted to the times to send a deafening message
Moderator
to
Taylor.
China
Yeah, she's
and
awful.
any other power in the world
Pence, you
that the United
serious?
States of America will defend our interest and defend our allies and have the ability
Win
to
River
do
Graham
it.
Sweeney announced. He already announced.
That's,
a while ago.
that's the message to send.
That
And
foreign
I
policy
really,
was
I
a
really
disaster.
believe that. But it's a very serious time. But I believe in peace through strength. I've long said that
How is
weakness
that
arouses
peace through
evil.
strength?
And I think that
That's not what-
the policies of the Biden administration, capitulating to Iran, begging them to come back into the Iran nuclear deal, giving Russia back a Nord Stream 2 deal, and of course the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan have literally emboldened
It's a little
our
bit of cringe,
adversaries
but
around
not
the
as
world.
bad as the China.
We need to
Ukraine
return to
stuff.
American strength. And I believe that begins with making the right investments in our national defense and giving our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guard the resources they need to accomplish their mission and come home safe.
I know you support a federal ban on the Chinese-owned app TikTok. Have you ever used
That's
TikTok?
based.
No.
Based?
Have your kids?
Let me get back to you on that.
That's a pretty good answer.
I haven't surveyed them about it. Look, a lot of young people like it, but what you got to understand, kids, look, they're collecting your personal information. And everything TikTok gets, the Chinese Communist government has access to. And I think TikTok is incompatible with both the privacy and the security of the United States of America.
Yeah,
and
I
it
agree.
shouldn't just be banned from our government institutions. It should be banned from this country.
Based.
Period. Full stop.
That's
So we're
based.
going to
We're
have to
down.
take a quick break. We have much
Okay.
more with Republican presidential candidate, former Vice President Mike Pence, when we come back.
Okay, I told you, cultural issues is what would get Pence a victory in Iowa. That pro-life stuff, if he hammers that 24/7, he could potentially take out, or I should say beat Trump. He would probably take second in Iowa. Instead, he threw it all away with this stupid foreign policy, whatever. That foreign policy stuff was a complete disaster. It's not as bad as Haley or Christie, but man. We got a couple super chats. Riley the Mini Deutschen for 2. If he ran third party in Jen, who would it benefit? Or in general, I think would benefit probably Biden. Because there's a lot of Christians that would vote for Pence. A radical businessman for 2. Why is he running? Is it just for money? I don't know. But yeah. It's just the foreign policy. We went from -5. We had a negative, people. For a couple seconds, we were at negative. And this is what I'm talking about. Pence. Yeah, it's not as bad as Christie or Nikki Haley, but that's not saying much. That's why I didn't increase the cringe that much. The pro-life stuff, though, that was so far, outside of Trump, the best response I've heard. Plus 2,000. The crowd does not like him. They seem very about him. But man, you had it. Pence, you should have just said, oh my gosh, we should be the brokers of peace. That's all he had to frickin' say. That was the one negative thing. The cope within age for 2, I get weird vibes from Pence. yeah, he's good on cultural stuff, but sucks on everything else. I mean, that pro-life stuff saying we got to support families, not just before birth, but after. That's freaking amazing. That's where Pence was cooking. But nope, he blew it. Can Vivek be Trump's VP? I mean, he could. I don't see it's gonna. I don't think it's gonna happen. Already got 1,000 already. Not as bad as Christie. Did you hear about the DC comic book issue where they did what to Superman? Chad, am I reading that correctly? They You're kidding, right? I'm not gonna say it on stream. What? They did what to Superman? I gotta look this up. This isn't real, isn't it? This can't be. This cannot be real. Oh my gosh, it is. It's actually real. I can't read on stream, but what is DC doing with Superman, your second most popular character behind Batman? You do that to him? Whatever. Screw it. I'm not. And of course, Chris Christie's gonna have a town hall. I forgot about that. Okay, we're back. Yay. Woo.
All with former Vice President Mike Pence. You speak a lot about your faith, and I want to ask you about that. You were raised Catholic, and you became an evangelical Christian when you were in college. I believe you're the only one of your 6 siblings who is not a member of the Catholic Church and doesn't pray
Catholic,
there.
my guy.
What's that like for you? I just saw you give your wife a look. Oh, and your brother.
Yeah, my brother confirmed that. So, yeah. No, look, I cherish my Catholic upbringing. I really do. It's one of the reasons why I was so offended when the Dodgers invited an anti-Catholic group to be celebrated in Dodger Stadium. I called them out. Look, there is no place in America's pastime for religious bigotry. Period. Full stop. So,
that's pretty good.
But look, I had a wonderful Catholic upbringing, but candidly, Dan, I just lost interest in religion in my high school years. I'd had a little bit of social success, and I just thought religion was a crush that I didn't need. And so I walked away from faith. But it wasn't until I got to college that I started to meet some young people that just told me they were Christians. They started to talk about having a personal relationship with God. That was new to me. I started to attend a fellowship group on the campus, and it would be in the spring of my freshman year in college at a place called Asbury University in Kentucky, where I was sitting on a hillside listening to singing and preaching, and it was like I heard the words for the first time, that God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son.
Again, this is the strong part of
that whoever might believe in him might not perish, but have everlasting life. And my heart was broken with gratitude for what had been done for me on the cross. And I stood up and I walked down and I accepted Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior. And my life has never been the same.
Pretty good.
So I still go to Mass with my mom. We worship in a lot of different Christian churches and experiences, but for me, I hope it's the defining characteristic of our life. I've often said I'm a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order, and I tried to live up to that every day.
I want to get to the audience, and I want you to meet Chaz Weber. He's a retired business consultant and Republican from Ames.
Of course,
Chaz.
he's consulted.
Mr. Vice President, thank you for being here. Your strong Christian faith has always been an indicator about your personal life and your political actions. How will your Christian faith guide you if you are elected president in relationship to government immigration programs and policies for the poor and targeted individuals, especially from Latin American countries?
Oh boy.
Well, it's a wonderful question, and thank you for affirming the importance of faith in our life. You know, there are issues that I've served in, and I've spoke about one of them already tonight, about the sanctity of life, that are deeply informed by my faith. You know, shortly after I made that decision to put my faith in Christ, I remember opening up the old book and reading, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And see, I've set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life so that you and your children may live." And
Good
that's when I
stuff.
knew that the cause of life was his cause, and it needed to be my cause. But more broadly, I like your question because it speaks about a heart of compassion that we're called to have as believers.
This should be interesting.
And it's one of the reasons why back when I was in the Congress of the United States, and Dana remembers this, I was the chairman of the House Conservative Caucus. But I looked at what was happening on our border, and I felt a moral obligation as the grandson of an immigrant to try and come up with a no amnesty immigration reform proposal. Not comprehensive immigration reform and amnesty, but rather to create a new system that would allow people to come into the country legally and in an orderly way. There was strong border security in it, strong internal enforcement in it, penalties for employers that hire illegal immigrants.
All right.
But it also created a guest worker program.
Oh, never mind. We're
I
going back
remember it was
up.
very popular among members
Nope.
of Congress.
Nope,
It was
back
about
up.
2005, and many members of Congress were fascinated by it. It was the idea that we would use private sector employment firms to work with the Department of Homeland Security and literally operate a guest worker program where people could come and go under the
Pence,
color
no.
of the law.
No, you're going too
Believe it or
far.
not, we used to have a guest worker program in the 1950s. It was called the Bracera program, but the labor unions shut it down under President Lyndon Johnson. And not surprisingly, a few short years later, illegal immigration started to happen at our southern border. You know, I truly do believe that we can fix a broken immigration system. We can
Guess
build an
what report
immigration
slumped
system
you?
that's built on the principles of merit and the needs of the American people. But we also can create a system where people that want to come and work, whether it be in agriculture or in other trades, can come and for a short period of time pay taxes, participate in our economy, and go home. But all of
Step
that
next from
was
New York.
animated and motivated by my deep conviction that we can't walk by on the other side of the road. The truth is, the crisis at our border today, there's suffering on both sides of the border. The American people are hurting, but the cartels are literally exploiting millions of people for the greatest, most appalling program of human trafficking in human history. 5 million people coming across our border in the last 2
Yeah, we
years,
want
all
work
being
for
driven by
Americans
the
first.
cartels and the failed policies of the Biden administration. We can fix a broken immigration system, and I'm animated by my faith. I'm animated by being the grandson of an immigrant to say that we owe the American people, we owe this generation and the next an immigration system
So I
that'll
want to
work
ask
for a
you
growing
about
America.
what happened during a town hall, again, the one I talked about before,
That's Effie.
that President Trump participated in. He said your administration's family separation policy was an effective deterrent and refused to rule out bringing it back as president. Would you bring it back?
No.
Okay. He also
Nobody applauds.
opened his
Look,
Nobody- Nobody clapped.
the family separation policy actually began under the Obama administration. And then we continued it until
Nobody's clapping. You hear this?
President Trump rightly reversed course. Look, we got to stop putting Band-Aids on the problem. We got to stop having small little fixes and programs. We've got to secure our border. We got to finish that wall. We got to put Remain in Mexico policy back into effect. Title 42.
Trump.
We got to end illegal immigration
Copy
and
and paste
asylum
Trump.
abuse like we did
That's
in
what
our
they're doing.
administration. Then we got to fix this broken immigration system once and for all.
Sir, I
gotta
want to go back to the audience and bring in Laura Lyons, a nurse from Grand Junction, who is her local city council, I should say, a Republican who voted for Joe Biden. Laura.
Thank you for having me, and happy birthday.
Thank you.
As a mom of a teacher, what are your thoughts on the educational vouchers? And how do you feel this will
Okay.
affect public schools, specifically
Come on,
small
Pence.
schools?
Pence, cook here.
Well, it's a wonderful question. I know you got to be proud of that teacher and your family. In fact, I've been remiss so far. I haven't introduced my favorite teacher. She spent 30 years in the classroom, 15 in Christian school, 15 in a public school, art teacher, second grade teacher, and actually turned out to be the best second lady the United States of America has ever had. My wife, Karen Pence, is with us today.
Okay, can we give the point of school choice, though? I'm not going to rank anything because this is wife, but still.
If you want to know Karen Pence, just think school teacher.
Come on, can we just get to
That's
the
what
point,
she
though?
is. And I'm apparently her prized pupil. 38 years tomorrow together.
Okay, Pence, I'm about to increase the cringe.
Look, we've got great challenges in education today. I mean, many of our most vulnerable populations are relegated to some of the most failing and dangerous schools in this country. And for a very long time, I have believed that parents ought to be able to choose where their children go to school, public, private, parochial, or homeschool. We ought to give parents that choice.
Good answer.
But let me say very emphatically, on behalf of your daughter, she teaches a public school, my wife that taught in public education for half her career. I think educational choice that's expanding around the country. My friend Governor Doug Ducey actually passed the first legislation in America for universal school choice.
Don't praise Ducey. No, Pence,
In
don't.
Iowa, you followed suit. In Indiana, I'm proud to say we followed suit as well. Other states are following and expanding the opportunity to choose where your children go to school.
Wasn't it
Every
Jeb Bush that
family in the
introduced
state.
it? Or no, it was
Now, for my part, I'm someone that believes
Wisconsin,
in
former
competition.
governor. He actually, I thought you were the.
I
he
actually
created
think
school
by
choice, I
letting
thought.
parents choose where
Tommy
their kids go to
Thompson.
school,
I could've
all
sworn
the
that,
schools are going to
whatever.
get better. I have confidence that our public schools can compete with our private schools, and they will be more responsive to the goals and the values of the people of their community when they have to
Ducey
compete for
sucked.
those students. So,
Ducey was awful.
you know, we're dealing in Iowa, we're dealing, and around the country, you're dealing with this issue of this radical gender ideology that's taken hold in a lot of our public schools. A group that I founded has been involved in battling against the Linn-Mar Community Schools case. It was a case literally where you could, the viewers will have a hard time believing this, but a student would have to bring in a slip from their parents to get an aspirin from the school nurse, but they could get a gender transition plan without telling their parents.
What?
We're fighting against that in the courts.
Hold up, what?
But I really do believe that by giving parents the ability
That's
to choose
real?
where their kids go to school, we're going to drive a lot of this politically correct nonsense out of the schools, and our public schools will respond.
Is
and
that
start
actually
respecting
real?
the
Can somebody
values
fact check
of every
that?
American.
Sir, I want to ask you about another issue related to this, and that is about what's going on in some legislatures. Some Republican-controlled states have banned transgender children from receiving gender-affirming care, even with the consent of their
Jesus.
parents. You talk a lot about parents'
cannot
rights.
believe that's
You
actually
do it on
real.
the campaign trail, or even before. You just did it now. So why do you believe it's the government's role to overrule what parents decide is best for their own children in this case?
Well, I strongly support state legislation, including as we did in Indiana, that bans all gender transition chemical or surgical procedures for kids under the age of 18.
Yes, that's pretty good.
If their parents support that.
I hear you.
Down
I hear you, but on
200.
this one, I got to tell you, Dana, and I'm talking as a father and I'm talking as a grandfather right now. Look, there's a reason why you don't let kids get a tattoo before they're 18, right? Because those of us that have been parents know that before they're 18, I don't want to say anything. My kids are watching, but you know, they think you're an idiot and for everything,
But
right?
I don't think
I've been
government
there.
regulates tattoos.
You got, look, I'm just telling you, when you're talking about something that is absolutely transformational and that we know from mental health experts, it more often than not has profound negative deleterious effects on people in the long term.
cooking.
I think at minimum, It is proper for state governments and state officials to simply say, however adults want to live, they can live. But for children, we're going to protect kids from the radical gender ideology and say
kinda
no
disagree with
chemical
that.
or
I'm not gonna
surgical
change it, but I kinda
gender
disagree.
transition before you're 18.
They should ban it outright. It's a
So I
terrible
just want to be
surgery.
clear on this because you are so adamant about parents' rights. But in this particular case, parents who say that along with the doctors, that what is best for their kids,
Bullshit.
what their kids
There's
feel
virtually
most
no
comfortable
cases of
with
that.
doing is a gender transition, that the parents should not be allowed to do that for their kids.
Look, the state has the obligation to see to the safety and health and well-being of the people of the state. And I accept that. I take your point. I take your
No, it's not a
point.
point,
but
it's a question.
Look,
It's a question.
what we have afoot in America is a radical gender ideology that has taken hold in our
surgery should be
schools,
bound
it's taken
outright
hold in
for,
our
like, old
universities.
cases, but
It
that
is
doesn't
afoot across the nation. And I think at minimum, we've got to make sure we protect kids from making decisions that permanently alter their bodies
He did
and
say at the bare
permanently
minimum.
set
That is
their
true.
lives on a difficult
That is a
path.
fair
So
point.
I hold to this view, and that's where I'll stand.
Okay, I just have one more question on this. Because
This monitor
sometimes
sucks.
it's easy, and you know this as a policymaker, it's easy to talk about policies. But I want to ask you this question on a more human level. What would you say to a transgender kid and their family who say that this is how I feel more comfortable and I don't feel comfortable another way, and that they feel that you are targeting them?
I would tell them that I love everybody. I'd put my arm around them and their parents.
Mutilation is always mutilation. It
But
is.
before they had a chemical or surgical procedure, I would say wait. Just wait. I mean, there's some people, maybe there's exceptions, but most people before you're 18 years of age. There's a reason we got that cut off for all kinds of categories in our society.
That is a fair point.
You just don't really know what you want in life. You don't know who you really are. It takes time to become an adult and figure that out. And I put my arm around them and I tell them I love them, but just wait. Just wait. And that's how we put the interest of our kids first.
Okay, thank you. We're going to have to
That
take another
that was a
quick
pretty
break.
iffy
Much more
answer at
with
the end,
Republican
but
presidential candidate, former
it's
Vice President Mike
not
Pence.
as bad.
When we come back. Stay with us.
Not as bad as it could have been. It was actually decent. Decent enough. I'm not going to produce cringe for the last part. That was iffy, but let's see here. Spence Sports Network for 2. Rank Haley, Christie, and Pence. Pence is obviously 1. Haley is 2. Christie's below a tire fire. Ben Sinnix for 2. At least Pence has to praise Woodrow Wilson. Not yet. Not yet. Yeah, I think he's going about it really weirdly. Yeah, he was going really good for a while, then that last part was just kind of, I don't know. But yeah, the cultural stuff has always been Mike Pence's bread and butter. Again, like somebody said in chat, he's 50-50. 50% of his policy is perfect. The other 50% atrocious. So, yeah. Or I should say perfect, just really good. Surgery never. Yeah, those surgeries should be banned outright for most cases. Add cringe just because it's Pence. No, I'm being a little bit fair this time. I'm being a little bit fair to Pence here. Not bad. Just joined. Did Pence mention Mud January? He did bring it up, but he did get asked a question about it. So, it's a little bit different. How should we let people cut parts off? Jets' mental illness matter of their age. Yeah, that's the point. You know, you can't just say, oh yeah, you could cut off your hand. Should they be allowed to? I mean, just because a parent says so? That's kind of, actually, it's kind of a fair argument when you think about it. Ask about trade. They won't because this is CNN. This is CNN we're talking about. Should this anchor is let's see. Will you put a cringe count in Donald Trump? Do you think it will get negative? I think yeah. Trump's the only one that's probably would go negative. Let's see. These people need help. Yeah, that's my whole point. I mean, it's like, it's just a fact. Like, 70% of these people have a mental illness. That's not me attacking them. It's just a fact. It's like, they do need help. A lot of them do. Trump should get a base counter. Maybe. Maybe. Do you think Ramaswamy will get negative? I don't know. You get a sex change at 18 but can't buy a beer at 21. Exactly. So it's like, okay. That political guy for 5. When will CNN have a town hall with Stapleton? Us Staplemen have been waiting for years for this run, and they're just going to throw out our movement. I always love the Stapleton super chats. They're always like peak. Thanks for the support. Thank you for the super chat. What is people pundits saying? I don't know. What will be the cringe counter for someone like Elder? Pence is back. Let's go. Pence has actually been pretty good so far, mostly.
With former Vice President Mike Pence, I want to ask about what we are seeing happening all up and down the Northeast right now, which is tens of millions of Americans are breathing toxic air today because of thick smoke coming from wildfires in Canada. A report from your administration, the Trump-Pence administration in 2018, found that man-made climate change is making wildfires more severe and more frequent. Will the climate crisis be a top priority if you're elected president?
Well, let me just say that clearly the climate is changing. Not as dramatically as the radical environmentalists like to present, but there's change. Over the next century, there'll be modest changes in temperatures. What we have to do in dealing with this, I think, is bring American innovation to it. I mean, the truth of the matter is, during our administration, we actually reduced CO2 emissions beyond what the previous administration had committed to, just through American innovation, through expanding American energy and natural gas. And I really do believe that we've got to make sure that whatever we do with regard to being stewards of the land and air and water cannot be done in a way that puts an undue burden on American families or American businesses. We've got to make sure that whatever we do doesn't disadvantage the United States in competing on the world stage. And I've been watching with great interest the smog. We've got kids that are stationed out west and share the concern. But I will also say that with regard to forest management, we got to do a better job.
That's pretty good
in this country, and we've got to be able to tell some of the radical environmentalists that you've got to harvest some trees in the forest to keep the forest healthy.
Yeah,
and
that's
it'll
the big
prevent
thing.
these wildfires from taking place in our country. But I know this is Canada, but we've got to bring more common sense to forest management in the days ahead.
That's pretty good. Pretty good.
I promise.
Let's go to the audience. Susan Olson is a federal grant manager from Des Moines who serves on the AARP Executive Council. She is a Republican who says she voted for Joe Biden. Susan.
Thank you for having me. My question is about Social Security.
Oh, God.
Mr. Vice President, how will you protect Social Security for me, our future generations, and how will you ensure that we receive the benefits that we've earned?
If you screw this up.
Well, I turned 64 today, so my interest in Social Security is growing. And I won't tell you how interested my wife is. Look, these are programs that the American people rely on, and we got to keep our promise to the American people. But the hard truth is that Social Security and Medicare are tracking for bankruptcy
Pence,
in the
be
next
careful
5 or 10
here.
years. And under the law,
Pence.
there will be mandatory cuts in Social Security and Medicare. That's why it's incomprehensible to me that Joe Biden refuses to even have a conversation with members of either political party about some common sense reforms that
Okay.
would put Social Security and Medicare back on a solid foundation.
What do you mean by this?
And end this avalanche of debt that we're bequeathing to our children and grandchildren. It's also disappointing to me that Donald Trump's position on entitlement reform is identical to Joe Biden's. I mean, their policy is insolvency.
That's
the
not
truth is,
true.
Not only are we looking at mandatory cuts in these programs if we don't reform them and improve them, but frankly, Dana, the $32 trillion national debt that we have today, which is the size of our nation's economy, first time since World
More
War
than
II that we have debt the size of our economy, that is actually set to grow, largely driven by the cost of entitlements
That's
over the
bullshit.
next 25 years, from $32 trillion to $150 trillion.
Bullshit.
And if we reach that point by the time my 3 perfect granddaughters are in their early 20s, all of our choices will be bad.
Even Reagan said Social
We'll
Security
either be
doesn't
faced with
contribute to the
cuts
debt.
in these programs, which we would never want to allow, or we'll be faced with having to raise taxes on the American people at a level that would never be
Just get
American.
rid of the payroll
It's one of the
cap.
reasons why
My gosh.
I know it's not, a lot of people say it's not political to do it, but for me, I think we've got a moral obligation to ensure the long-term solvency of Social Security and Medicare, and that means saying to Americans over the age of 40, we're going to keep the system that we have, but for Americans under the age of 40, we've got to work on the kind of reforms that'll lessen the burden of debt and change these New Deal programs into a better deal for younger Americans, and we can do it.
Would you raise
But
the
it's going to
retirement
take
age?
leadership.
Would you raise the retirement age?
Look, I think the first thing that's got to happen, Dana, is that we've got to make sure the American people understand the nature of the debt crisis that's being driven by entitlements.
That's
I mean,
bullshit.
again, it's incomprehensible to me
That's
that the first
horseshit.
80-year-old president in American history refuses to even talk about retirement systems and health care for seniors that are headed for
whatever.
bankruptcy and could literally
That's not how it
bankrupt the
works,
country.
As you said, Republicans are also saying a lot of them off the table.
I must tell you, I think it was right to leave it off the table for the debt ceiling deal, okay? But in the long term, I agree with you. I stipulate to your point. There's far too many Republicans, including my former running mate, that are also saying we leave this off the table. I think every time the American people have been given the truth about a challenge our nation is facing, and then given common sense and compassionate reforms,
What's a reform
which would
then?
include reforming the systems. It could be a change in the age of eligibility, but it also could include letting younger Americans invest a portion of their payroll taxes
Fine.
in a mutual fund like the
Just get
TSP
rid of
program that
the
10
payroll
million
cap.
federal employees are in today. We could literally give them a higher return on investment in exchange for changing the benefit structure that they
I'm
would receive
fine
under
with
Social Security
letting people
and staving
invest,
off that massive
but
debt. It
get
takes
rid of the payroll
leadership.
cap.
We've got to
Get rid
engage
of
the
it.
American people.
That solves the
and
problem.
I think let me say this. I believe that democracy depends on heavy
God damn
doses
it.
of civility. And I think we've got to produce leadership at the national level
You see nobody's
that
clapping
has
compared
the
to
ability
earlier?
to take on these kind of large problems, but has generated an environment of civility and respect for people across the political spectrum that allows us to get to the table and figure it out. And if I'm your president, I promise you, that'll be our aspiration every day.
Let's go back to the audience. I want you to meet Marianne Hanusa. She works for a nonprofit helping
that's
children
Trump's
with mental
campaign.
health
What a
challenges. She's a
dumbass.
former member of the Iowa State
Just
House,
say get rid
a
of the-
member of her
Oh my
county
gosh.
Republican Central Committee, and she is from Council Bluffs. Mary.
Great.
Mr. Vice President, thank you for coming back to Iowa, and thank you for your service to our nation.
Thank you.
Americans have lost faith in our government, from the CDC to the FBI.
Ooh.
If you are president, what will you do to restore a level of trust in the actions and the decisions of our federal government agencies?
That's a pretty good question.
Well, first, I really want to agree with you very strongly that Americans have lost faith in our institutions broadly, and especially in the federal government. But I tried to remind people today in my announcement here in Iowa that while we have many problems in government, this is still a great nation with great people. We just need government as good as our people again, right? And I think it
Not a
all
good
begins with recognizing that personnel is policy. It's one of the first things I learned when I arrived in Washington, D.C. about 20 years ago. And that is that the people you surround yourself with really define your capacity to serve and to advance the policies that you came to advance. And I will tell you, I don't know precisely, Marianne, how I get from here to January 20th, 2025.
That's cringe.
I'll leave
It's
that
the
to the
question.
good Lord and the American people. But I say this with deep humility, that based on my experience in the Congress, the relationships I still enjoy there, based on my service as governor and the relationships
Just
I have with
answer
governors
the
around the country,
question.
based on my 4 years as vice president, I promise you, I would know what to do and, more importantly, who to do it with
That's a bad answer.
to put this country back on track.
That's a real
on day
bad
one.
answer.
I mean, it's about assembling a team. It's about bringing majorities with you in the House and the Senate. It's about having partners in state houses around the country.
Yeah, but
And
self
I would say,
departments. What
again,
does that have to do with
with deep
anything like the
humility,
FBI?
That the presidency is no place for on-the-job training. And with the challenges that we're facing in the wider world today, the challenges we're facing
get
in our
rid of the
economy,
ATF.
a crime wave in our cities, a crisis at our southern border,
Just answer the
an
question.
assault on our liberties, the American people, I think, will recognize in the days ahead
What was the
that
question
we need
about how you
experienced
going to increase
leadership that
trust
can
in the
assemble
government?
not
What does this
just
have
an
to do
agenda,
with
but a
trust?
team. And I promise you, if you give me the privilege to serve as President of the United States, we'll assemble a team you'll be proud of on day one.
If I hear him say team one more time,
Sorry, I want to go back to the audience. You mentioned crime. I want to ask Cheryl Math to ask her question, rather. She works at a family-owned hotel and is a Republican from Des Moines. Cheryl.
Good evening, Mr. Vice President.
Hi, Cheryl.
My question is, how would you handle the increased crime rates in our major cities?
Well, first and foremost, I would say we're not going to defund the police in this country. We're going to support
Generic.
the
I'll
men
get with them,
and
though.
women in law enforcement at every level. I mean, I have to believe that the criminal element in this country has been emboldened by the radical left's defund the police movement.
Pence.
In a very real sense, has helped foment some of the crime that we see today. But I also believe it's going to be important that we get a lot more serious about serious offenders.
That's true.
We passed what was called the First Step Act at the federal level. President Trump signed it into law. When I was governor of the state of Indiana,
Not a good law.
we signed similar legislation, but
Was
in
way
the legislation
too
that we
lenient.
passed, we not only created an
Way too
opportunity
lenient.
to try and reduce recidivism, people going back to prison over and over again, to give them a new start in life, to make an honest
It was way
living.
too lenient. It was
But
a
we
bad
also
law.
raised the penalties. We raised the penalties on serious offenders. And I must tell you, with this crime wave in our city that is claiming incomprehensible numbers of lives, I mean, we just passed through
left.
Memorial Day weekend. My parents both grew up on the south side of Chicago. My heart breaks for Chicago and for the violence that's happening in that city alone, but it's happening literally in cities around the country. I frankly think we need to take a step back from the approach of the First Step Act. We need to get serious and tough on violent crime, and we need to give our cities and our states the resources to restore law and order to our streets, and I promise you we'll do that
Yeah,
if
declare
I'm your
war and
president.
gain violence. I agree.
I just want to say, because I've heard other people talk about Chicago, just for the record, the ATF data shows that more than half of the recovered guns used to commit crimes in Illinois in 2021, you know where they came from? Indiana. So I just wanted to put that on the record.
Oh yeah,
But I want to ask about the
that's
First Step
okay.
Act,
That's
because I'm not
bullshit.
sure
I'm
if you
giving
saw
Pence something for that.
Governor
That's
Ron
BS.
DeSantis has said that if he's elected, he wants to repeal the First Step Act. What's your response to that?
Well, let me say, I just said I think we need to take a step back and rethink the First Step Act.
That's
We've
base.
got a crime wave in our major cities. And I think now more than ever, we ought to be thinking about how we make penalties tougher on people that are victimizing families in this country. So on that point, I would agree with others. But I also will tell you,
ATF.
in the category of mass shootings, Dana, we've talked about this many times over the years. I've had enough. And I've also had enough of every time one of these mass shooters claims innocent lives. It's happened again just in a few short days ago.
I'm not, this is totally fair
Washington,
use.
D.C. immediately squares off, everybody goes to their corners, and we start talking about eroding the rights of law-abiding citizens to keep and bear arms. I will always stand for the Second Amendment right of the American people to keep and bear arms. But when at a recent forum, I basically said, look, I think we've got to get a lot tougher on people doing these mass shootings. I think justice delayed is justice denied. And I think if you engage in a mass shooting that claims lives, you should face execution not in years, but in months. We ought to have expedited due process that ensures that anyone that engages in a mass shooting in this country knows that they will meet their fate within a year and a half. I think that's closer to justice than anything that we have today.
I've been waiting for somebody to say it.
I also think we've got to get serious. I think as a country, and this is now, I'm talking as a grandfather now. Karen and I became grandparents 3 times over in the last 2 years. And they're perfect. Incredible girls. But I have to tell you, I have very good friends that are actually here tonight that have young children in school in Nashville.
Oh, jeez.
That shooter was brought down because of the courage of law enforcement that ran in without regard to their personal safety and took them down.
That was awful.
But apparently he had a list that had my friend's daughter's school on it. It was just a couple miles away. I think the time has come for us as a country to end the discussion about school security. And if it takes federal legislation and federal funding, we ought to fund an armed and trained security guard at every public and private school in America. And we ought to do it.
That's amazing.
Can I just ask you about that? Because what we've seen in Uvalde, what we saw in Parkland, is that armed guards,
freaking
they don't
incompetence
always
what happened
work.
there.
They're not enough.
They sat on
to
their
stop mass
asses. Well,
shootings.
I can't even say it.
What do you say to that? I mean, we've seen it happen where there have been armed guards and it didn't stop somebody with a semi-automatic weapon.
Well, it's number one, that's why I always say trained and armed. You know, in the state of Indiana, I'd been elected governor, but I wasn't sworn in yet when Sandy Hook happened. And we huddled with state legislative leaders and immediately provided funding for what we call resource officers, armed guards that are now in every school in the state of Indiana. And by God's grace, we haven't seen an incident like this in our state.
I kind of agree with that.
But they've got to be trained. I mean, this is the reason why, if it takes federal funding, Dana, let's do it, right? I understand state resources. I balanced 4 budgets when I was governor of the state of Indiana, okay? I understand there are limited resources at the state level. That's why I just think we ought to end the conversation, and Washington, D.C. ought to just step up and make sure that there's funding available, not just to have an armed guard, but a trained guard who can also be a part of the school community. I mean, the fact is, having somebody that understands who the kids are, they know who they are, they can pick up a sense of where they are. And the last thing, and I've said this, we have got to return our country to institutional mental health care. People that are a danger to themselves and a threat to our communities. Too many families, and I remember when the Parkland shooting happened. I mean, to hear how many times the shooter's mother went to law enforcement begging for some help and was told, we have nowhere to take them. We have nothing we can do. I think, you know, in the 1970s, we walked away from institutional mental health care in this country. We've got to get back to that. Families that have young people that are dealing with the advent of serious mental illness have to have a place to go.
Yeah, put them in institutions.
And we need to make a national investment to do just that.
What about red flag laws? I know that there's one in your home state. Do you think there should be a national red flag law? The idea of allowing law enforcement and the courts to temporarily remove guns from people who pose a threat to themselves or others?
I think giving tools to law enforcement to be able to intervene, particularly those resource officers at schools, if they sense that someone is potentially a danger to themselves or others, are useful. But I think we've got to be very cautious about red flag laws.
That's a pretty good
going
answer.
forward. I think we got to make sure and protect the due process rights of Americans. We cannot allow laws like that or other laws to erode the constitutional right to keep and bear arms in this country. We never want to create, particularly at a time when there's so much distrust of institutions, including our Department of Justice. We never want to perceive the American people that there's an opportunity for someone to come and take away firearms that you are lawfully possessing. So due process, I think, has to be in the
These are
forefront.
pretty good
Sir, we have to take a break, but I just want to quickly go back to something you said about expediting the processing of people who engage in mass shootings. A lot of people who are mass shooters, they go in with the intention to die. So how would the threat of execution be a deterrent?
Well, I follow these stories just as closely as you do. And of course, our years in the White House, we saw one tragedy after another. And I know we hear that, and we see evidence oftentimes in the aftermath that they went in without regard to whether they would survive.
This is one of the strongest
I just
parts of
believe in the
Pence right here.
deterrent of the law. And I believe perhaps if we made it clear, I mean, think about this. The Parkland shooter is going to spend the rest of his life in jail in Florida.
That's for punishment, yeah.
And that's not justice. You don't take the lives of nearly 20 young people and get 3 squares a day for the rest of your life. Okay? I mean, the old book says, if you take a man's life, by man shall your life be taken. We've got to get back to justice in this country that is swift and certain. And my hope, and maybe it's just common sense, my hope is that if we sent that deafening message, that you could, these cowards that go into places that they assume people are not armed and open fire on innocent civilians would know that if they are captured in the wake of this shooting, that they're going to face capital punishment and justice.
These are really
and
good
their maker
answers.
in months, not years. I believe it will be a deterrent, or so I would pray.
We're going to have to take another quick break. More with Republican presidential candidate, former Vice President Mike Pence.
Pence is starting to rebound a little bit. The cultural stuff and stuff like this is where Pence could do good. Cultural stuff and stuff with guns. The cope with an age for 2, Pence gives me Francis Underwood vibes. Really? Really? That's who you think? Freaking, you're thinking of Kevin Spacey? I don't know about that. Solid. Yeah, that was a pretty good segment. Pretty good. Mac Bain explains for $7 Canadian, Staples stands, hashtag Stapleton 2024. Oh no, the Stapleton fans are back. Thanks for all the support. Thank you. Support's greatly appreciated. Mixed bag so far. Yeah, it's, again, you take out the foreign policy stuff and some of the stuff with Social Security, he could seriously be really, I would consider voting for him in a primary. If he would abandon the neocon stuff, that alone, I mean, he needs to change his stance in economics. That's one thing. That's my one real complaint. The neocon stuff alone makes him unvotable. I can't vote for him in the primary. Unless it came down to him versus like Nikki Haley. I would vote for Pence. But so far, I'm surprised. Pence is based on social issues but cringe on foreign policy. That's always been his problem. Yeah, I mean, we don't want endless wars. We want peace around the world. I think Pence will replace DeSantis at number 2. I don't think so. I don't really think so. I don't know. I just think that Team Pence is making too many mistakes when it comes to foreign policy. It's still Trump 2024. I'm saying that, but I'm like, okay, in a primary, if he got rid of the neocon stuff, I would consider voting for him. I would strongly consider it. Stapleton Santos. I will not cast my vote for Mike Pence in 2024. The American people need a strong leader. Well, the thing with Pence is, I just think that, get rid of the neocon stuff and he's fine. It went down. Yeah, he had really good answers about, like, guns and stuff. Pence could do good in Iowa. I'm telling you, if there's one state an upset would happen, it would be Iowa. Especially for somebody like Pence. Pence is like JFK next to him. DeSantis cold fish. The issue with Pence, it just seems like I don't know, he just seems awkward tonight. Justinian for 2, quoting the Bible is based. It was. I think that Pence is honestly more charismatic than DeSantis. I wouldn't go that far, but I gotta see a bit more Pence. Especially on like a debate stage. Pence more likable than DeSantis. Give her the foreign policy, maybe. Maybe. If the nomination came down to Chris Christie or Haley, who would you vote for? Haley? I will never vote for Chris Christie. Nope. Is the town hall over? No, it's just on a break right now. Okay. Yeah, next Monday I think Chris Christie's on. Forget another town hall. That's gonna be awful. Copeland age for 2. I do agree that his death penalty stuff was based. Yeah. That and the pro-life stuff. Those were the 2 strongest moments so far. Easily. Okay, I think we're back. Yeah, we are.
Presidential town hall with former
All right.
Vice President Mike Pence. So I want to get right to the audience, and I want you to meet Jesse Johnson, a Republican from Idell. And he is an accountant and the worship director at his church. Jesse.
Howdy,
Pence
Mr.
likes
Vice
immediately.
President.
Hi, Jesse. Good to see you.
My question is, how do you plan to reach hardcore Trump or nothing Republicans that supported the president's brash and bullying nature just as much as his policies?
I like this question.
Well, look, I think Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are going to be the great unifiers of the Republican Party. Okay, look, I'm running for president of the United States. We're going to have a spirited primary, and I hope I come out on top. But I don't worry about the unity of the party. Everywhere I go, I hear how deeply concerned people are with the failed policies
I would just say
of the
focus
Biden-Harris
on like
administration. I mean, it's
pro-life
extraordinary how far we've dropped in just 2.5 short years. I mean, that disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan is where it all began. I mean, the chaos that's unfolding in the wider world, and not just the war in Eastern Europe, not just provocations by China, but literally to see China now negotiating agreements between Iran and Saudi Arabia. I mean, there is a vacuum of leadership on the international scale. The American people know it and they see it. And then here at home, the burden that we've heard about from families here in Iowa, just trying to make ends meet. I remember being at a gas station, Dana, in Hobart, Indiana. There was a mom there. We were doing a thing about high gas prices. And there were a couple of you news people around. She had 2 little kids in the back seat, and I looked at her and I said, "How you holding up with high gas prices?" She said, "Oh, we're doing okay." She said, "We only have to go to the food bank once a week now." And I looked at her and I said, Are you out of work? She said, No, my husband's got a job and I'm home, but she says, we only have so much money for groceries. With gasoline prices being where they are, and grocery prices being where they are, we just go to the food bank. I mean, you reported many times that about 2/3 of the American people are living paycheck to paycheck. And so when you talk about divisions in the Republican Party, look, we're going to have a very spirited debate. And as I said today in my announcement speech, not only did the president have our differences that have continued from the past, but a different vision for our party. I'm somebody that believes in American leadership in the world. Our party needs to lead on fiscal responsibility and stand without apology for life. We'll have those debates.
Going out a little bit for that.
I think once the people of Iowa play your role and Republican primary voters play their role, I'm confident that whoever our standard bearer is, and I hope it's me, is going to be supported by Republicans and independents and many Democrats around the country who know we can do better and we can bring this country back.
Another thing that you said in your announcement today, you said, quote, anyone who puts themselves over the Constitution should never be president of the United States, clearly referring to former President Trump. An hour later, you pledged to support the eventual Republican nominee. So if you think that Donald Trump should never be president, how could you commit to supporting him
This
if
could
he
end
is the
badly
nominee?
for Pence.
Well, let me say what I said today was that anyone who puts themselves above the Constitution should never be president in the first place. And anyone who asks anyone else to put them over the Constitution should never be president again.
Pence, you're screwing this up. This could end badly. Where's this going?
I had hoped that President Trump would come around on our difference about that tragic day and about my role. And I still hope he does. I mean, we'll have differences that are worthy of debate, but at its very core, it's important to remember the President of the United States takes an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States and faithfully execute the laws. But at the core of that is a willingness to submit to the collective wisdom of generations of Americans enshrined in the Constitution of the United States. And I hold the view that it should be a prerequisite of any man or woman that would ever hold the office of president that you would agree to never
Pence,
put
you
yourself
can't keep
above
doing
the
this, my guy.
Constitution.
What are you doing?
My son's a Marine. He flies the Joint Strike Fighter in the Marine Corps. And around the time of that fateful day, I'll never
Orange
forget,
man.
my son looked
Yeah,
at
a
me
lot
and
of
he
Trump
said,
derangement
Dad,
syndrome. Just say you'll
you
support
took
him.
the same oath I took.
Just say you had a disagreement
Nothing else matters.
with Trump, but you will support
I mean, the
him.
men and women of our armed forces take the very same
Dumbass.
oath to support and defend the Constitution. We don't give them the option to decide whether it's in their interest or not. We give them the assignment and they go without regard to their personal safety. And I think whoever is president of the United States, that man or woman should have no other view. But let me say that with regard to supporting the Republican nominee, look, I started in politics as a Democrat.
What?
But as soon as I heard the voice and ideals of the 40th President of the United States, I joined the Reagan Revolution and never looked back.
He
And
actually
I've
was a
always supported
Democrat?
the Republican nominee for President of the United States, and I'll support the Republican nominee in 2024, especially if it's me.
Well, but I just need to follow up on this because you also say, and I've heard you say this for years, I'm a Christian, I'm a conservative, and a Republican in that order. You just spent a lot of time, both here and earlier today, explaining why you think that the former president did not uphold his oath to the Constitution. So then how can you say that you would support him if he's the nominee?
Well, because I don't think Donald Trump's going to be the nominee
what if
in
he
the
is?
Republican Party. I
You
don't think he's going to be the nominee.
What if he is?
I have great confidence in Republican primary voters. We have a field of strong and experienced candidates that
How did that
grew
go in
by one today.
2016?
And I truly do believe that people here in Iowa are going to recognize the challenges that we're facing and understand that different times call for different leadership. The American people don't look backwards. We look forward. And I truly do believe whatever the polls show and whatever the pundits are saying, that when the time comes, the people of Iowa are going to take a fresh look at all of us that have stepped forward. I don't think my old running mate is going to be the Republican nominee for president, and I'm very confident.
That was such an
very
awful
confident
answer.
that I'll be able to support the Republican nominee for president of the United States. And I hope it's me.
That was awful.
I want to go again to the audience, and I want you to meet Sue Betham Mum. She is a Republican from Ankeny who owns a dance studio, a board member for the National Association of Women Business Owners. Sabetha.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for coming to Iowa and listening to Iowans.
Thank you.
My question. Although I voted Republican in the last presidential election, I was very encouraged when I heard President Biden say in his inaugural speech he was going to focus on uniting both parties and America. Unfortunately, that has not happened. In my opinion, in fact, the parties and the country are more divided than ever. And I, as a mom, As a coach of young children and as an American, I'm tired of the fighting. What specific steps would you take as president to bring all parties to the table and bring Americans together to end the divisiveness in this great country?
Divisiveness.
Well, thanks for the question. It's something that's very meaningful, as I share your aspiration for our country.
Yeah, I'm increasing cringe a little bit.
Look, I said before, I think democracy depends on heavy doses of civility. And over the last 20 years of my career, we've always tried to aspire to that ideal.
Oops.
My faith requires me to treat others the way I want to be treated. And while earlier in my career, the first time I ran for office, I didn't live up to that. 10 years later, when the opportunity came around, we sought to do just that. And quite frankly, over the course of my years in Congress and as governor and as vice president, I've always tried to reflect that. You know, I think our politics are more divided than ever before in my lifetime. But I'm not convinced the American
CNN
people
gets
are
these
as
people off the
divided as
street.
our
I
politics.
swear they do. I don't know where they get some of
You know,
these
Karen
people
and I
from.
moved home to Indiana. We bought 5 acres and a pond after we left the White House. But I have to tell you, you know, one of the things I've learned, you get 15 miles out of Washington, D.C., the people of this country actually get along pretty well. Right? I mean, the American people show respect to one another. People here in Iowa, people in Indiana, people with whom we differ, we show civility and respect most
Always
days.
blumph. That is true.
I just think we need government as good as our people. And when I think of the challenges that are facing America today, a world that seems to be more dangerous every day, inflation,
Fake Republican or CNN employee.
crisis at
One
our
of the
border,
two.
crime in our major cities, what seems to be an assault on our values, failing schools in so many of our major cities and towns across the country. And now more than ever, we need to create an environment in
CNN's
politics
fake
that
crowd.
allows
I
us
don't
to talk
disagree
to
with
one
that.
another.
They probably do.
You know, I wrote a book about my career, reflected on this, and I will tell you, taking that approach in my career, I was able to forge relationships with people in Congress that I agreed with on nothing.
Needs a buoy. Not
One
yet.
of them was the late John Lewis, an icon of the civil rights movement and the right-hand man of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. John and I differed on everything.
CNN audience is probably their only viewers.
Except that I knew he was a great man.
My book.
And we recognize the importance of our Christian faith to both of us. I'll never forget when I was leading the House Republican Conference, John Lewis called my office and asked if Karen and I would co-lead the annual civil rights pilgrimage to walk across the Edmund Pettus Bridge with him. The very bridge where years and years earlier he had been beaten to within an inch of his life. And by his suffering and struggle, he'd advanced a more perfect union in America. It's one of the great privileges of my life that Karen and I and our 3 children walked across that bridge with John Lewis. And I mourned his passing. It's a sense of personal loss when he left us. But John and I,
Yeah, it's a constitutional Republican.
again, never agreed on much, but we could always talk. And I think that's what we have to get back to when you think about the challenges we're facing in America. I just think we've got to get back to the kind of politics
It started
that reflects
pretty good
the
with the
decency and
shit, then it's
civility
went pretty good again.
that the
Now it's
American
starting
people
to
show
teeter.
each other every day. And I believe we will. And I hope to be a part of it.
Oh. Barely nobody
Former Vice
clapped.
President Mike Pence, thank you so much for being here. this
That's it?
evening. And thank you to our audience,
was it?
everybody here.
That was pretty bad at the end. Let's see here. Grade Pence's town hall. A, B, C, D. Like, it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad by any stretch of the imagination. It was okay. Honestly, you should do a tier list or some sort of list of these town halls. They're all uniquely terrible. Some of them are, but Pence's was actually like passable. But that was yeesh. Some of that stuff was not good. Not good whatsoever. It was bad, but wasn't terrible. I wouldn't say it was bad. It was like meh. Still think Trump's Fox one was worse. No, Chris Christie's was beyond terrible. D+. I give it a C. Nowhere as bad as Haley's. He was better than Chris Christie, Nikki Haley, and Ron DeSantis. Yeah, I agree. 2 extremely amazing statements and 2 extremely horrible. Yeah, that's the nutshell of Pence. Really good on social issues, dog shit on foreign policy. That's always been Pence. Chris announced will go down as worst ever. I am not watching it. I'm gonna have to watch his town hall next week, am I? Oh man. But yeah, I think that was okay. Better than I expected. That I will say. What's the analysis saying? I don't frickin' care what they say. I don't care what CNN's talking about right now. I would rather vote for Biden than Chris Christie. I just won't vote. I maintain that Christie was a desperate cry for help. The analysis. I don't care what the analysis say. They're frickin' full of it. Doug Burgum's running. I know that. Thoughts Fox News being pissed at Tucker. Yeah, I heard about this. Like they're gonna apparently like sue him, I guess, for starting a Twitter channel or whatever. It was okay. Yeah, it was all right. I mean, nothing special. Nothing bad. Nothing like okay. A quarter of it was awful, but a quarter of it was perfect. The rest of it was meh. So ends up meh. The cringe counter was only 1250. That's not that bad. Not bad at all. Pence is my second choice for President. Trump first. DeSantis is on my second choice. The biggest stuff was probably him talking about his obesity. That Chris Christie stuff was, I don't know. Where's Tyrone? I think he's busy with his personal life. Who does better in Texas and Nevada, Trump or DeSantis? DeSantis in Texas, Trump in Nevada. It was like 50% great, 50% terrible. Yeah, I say 25% great, 25% shit, 50% meh. I'm back. Was it really bad? No. It was just, Probably the best one so far. Not counting Trump, yes. I still say Trump's CNN town hall was perfect, but the town hall on Fox was certainly a town hall of our time. I don't think anyone could be worse than Chris Christie's. Yeah, I'm still recovering from that tragedy. Christie has completely ruined any judgment we can make on anyone. Yeah, so I'm going to probably do a live reaction to Chris Christie's next week. Gosh. God help us all. When will Vivek Ramaswamy announce his candidacy? Didn't he already? I thought he did. Did you see the new Tucker Carlson episode? Yeah, that's what I was talking about. Chris Christie making me feel bad. I don't know what he's on. Somebody got to talk to him. Like, dude, do you really think you can, run for president in the year 2023 when you haven't been relevant since 2017? Christie's by far the worst. I left. What happened to make the cringe go crazy? Social Security and the Trump stuff. Kept going on about Trump. Or is this me, or was Christie crying when he did his? I don't know. What's your biggest policy disagreement with Trump? Ooh. Probably like gay marriage. Because he's like for it. That's probably what it is. Christie eats too many burgers. Yeah, I agree. Oh gosh, if Liz Cheney does a town hall, no. If Liz Cheney does a frickin' town hall, I don't know. We know Vic is running. Yeah, I know. I don't know why somebody saying he isn't. Christie left the governorship in the approval rating in single digits. Chris Cheney. That's like Christie Cheney is like the absolute worst ticket you could have. Only Kamala would make me prefer Chris Christie. Cheney might be the only one who could be worse than Christie. Yeah, she's the only one I can think of. Kanye West Town Hall. No, that's... that would be the most schizo-filled rant I would ever hear. Cheney should run third party. That's a rumor going around. That Cheney or Manchin's going to run no labels. Liz Cheney versus Chris Christie for the Republican nomination, and you have to vote. Who's getting your vote? Jeez. What was Liz? Hold on. Liz Cheney numbers USA. I gotta see how I gotta see how Cheney is. Liz Cheney. Because if Cheney is like has a decent immigration score, let's see. What the? Cheney has a B grade. What? Cheney has a B on Numbers USA? I may have to go with Cheney over Christie. Barely, if that's the case. Yeah, she's not awful on immigration. I'm shocked. Most Republicans are better than Cheney. Not Christie. Christie's a freaking nut job. Cornel West Town Hall. Yeah, isn't he running on the People's Party? Right? I don't know. I hope no labels takes votes from Joe. They're going to. Especially the Run Manchin. Cheney just has Trump derangement syndrome. Yeah, that's the thing. At least she's decent on immigration. That's something, I guess. Kanye West. Has Tim Scott done a town hall yet? I don't believe so. Liz Cheney / Chris Christie versus Nuke from AOC. Who do you vote for? The Nuke. That's Cornel West, not Kanye. Yeah, that's People's Party. Will no labels make Minnesota competitive? No. Yeah, Cornel West is running Green Party. I thought it was People's Party. I thought the People's Party made a big deal about that. That it was running. Either way, he could take votes away from Biden. They're going to do everything they can to keep off the ticket in Wisconsin. I guarantee it. Democrats made an attack on Burgum. Surprisingly, Burgum had a decent announcement, which I'm shocked about. He did focus on 2 of the 3 main issues, the economy and I believe was immigration, or foreign policy. I believe he did focus on that, so I'll give him that. All right, I think we're gonna head out a little bit. If you got any more super chats, send them now or forever go in peace. I think we're gonna head off in a couple minutes. Just send your questions now, or probably gonna end a little bit. Thoughts on the Constitution Party? They're full of feds. They've done nothing of relevance whatsoever. Well, didn't they screw us over in Colorado a couple years ago? Don Bacon or Adam Kinzinger? Don Bacon, just for the memes. Peel Party was so hyped for Cornel West, Channel West Coast. This should be... Is it Doug Bergman neocon? I don't know. But he seemed decent on the announcement. I don't know enough about him. He's the governor of North Dakota. So... yeah, I don't know why the Democrats are attacking Burgum. Missouri, I would rather vote for Christie and Cheney than Newsom. I would not vote for anybody in that scenario. He said he was running People's Party. thoughts on the American Solidarity Party? Isn't it like the party that wants to ban like alcohol, right? No opinion. What the hell is the People's Party? It's a scam that Andrew Yang started. It's like, it's kind of like the No Labels Party, but like less relevant and like less impactful. The birthday party. Constitution Party costs us Gordon Smith's Senate seat. People Party is like McCulloch's Socialist Party. Yeah, they're just full of feds. They're scam. One big scam. Because they're not going to do anything of relevance. Unless Cornel West is actually their nominee. Which, hey. McBain explains for $2.75, 79 cents Canadian. I think Burgum does okay. He's worth over $1 billion. Yeah, that's his one strength. He has a shitload of money. And he is relatively unknown. He can easily raise the favorability. It's not like, you know, Mike Pence. People already know who he is. Kind of not like Ron DeSantis. People already know who he is. Burgum is unknown. Ass Hutchinson hasn't done much so far. Yeah, I think he's just doing it for the money. He got some book deal and he's going to run for like a month and drop out. Thoughts on Jamaican politics? The actual elections in Jamaica? I guess Kanye West. Maybe. Everyone loves Doug. Burgum's okay, just not enough people know who he is. That's his problem. But that could also be a positive. If he raises a lot, if he spends a lot of money putting out ads like, we gotta focus on energy independence, you know, all that stuff. That could work. That could work. Burgum is so irrelevant. Yeah, but he's unknown. That's the thing. That may actually be a benefit in his situation. If he gets his name ID out there. He could do something. I still don't get why he's running, though. Will Burgum be the Bloomberger this year? I don't... Bloomberg... I still don't get how that happened. How did you blow it? You had it. You should have stayed in the basement. Instead, he went on the debate stage and he blew it. This town hall taught me that today is Mike Pence's birthday. I'm shocked about that. I didn't know that. Who is it closest to Ross Perot this year? Probably Trump. Let's see. Kanye West for U.S. Supreme Court. Absolutely not. Just no. Berg was a good governor. I just don't know enough about him. It's not like Kristi Noem where everybody know who she is. It's Doug Burgum. Doug's like Reagan, Trump, and Eisenhower all rolled together. He has zero downsides. I gotta fact check that. Berg was worth less than Bloomberg. It is more charismatic. It might balance out. Yeah, Berg, he doesn't have enough as much as Bloomberg, but if he doesn't suck at debates, could be interesting. Joe Exotic wants to run for president as a Dem. I thought he was a libertarian. Trump's birthday stream next Wednesday? Maybe. I'm pretty sure that message praising Burgum was a joke. Who do you think Trump's VP will be? Ali Stefanik. Hate to say it, but it looks like that's who Trump's going to go with. Which sucks because he's not really that good. But it looks like at least Stefanik will probably be Trump's VP right now. Do you have a Discord? No. Or a Patreon. I got rid of it. Maybe still will be up, but, you know, the best way to support the channel is joining the channel. Like, you get, like, you know, shoutouts at the end of each video. if you go for the $5 thing. So if you want to support the channel, if you want quote-unquote benefits, you could join the channel. Best way to support it. Perry Johnson for Treasury Secretary. That's actually an interesting choice. He is somebody that I would actually trust in that situation. He's very rich, which seems like to be a trend with Treasury Secretaries, but he also does have a unique plan, the 2-cent plan, which is pretty much just saying, look, for every dollar we spend, just cut 2 cents every year. Seems reasonable. I mean, that's messaging right there. Like, only 2 cents of a dollar? Well, yeah, we support that. He's Stefanik or Chris. He's Stefanik easily. What about locals? I don't have one. Got rid of it. I don't know what to use it for. That's my problem. Sean Hannity as president. Oh, God. He would do a state of a... He would do an address to Congress every other week. And like a White House address, like from the Oval Office, every single day. That would be awful. Why is Trump cringe with picking people? Because he wants to appease everybody. People just make it sound like he hates everybody and everybody hates him. Well, people hate him, but he's the type of guy that, you know, he wants to be friends with everybody. He wants to appease everybody. Every single person. And not usually a good thing, because he picks the wrong people because of it. It's like, oh, don't worry, Trump. This time, everybody will love you. Trump Youngkin. That could be an interesting choice, but it's not going to happen. All right, if anybody got any last second super chats, send them now or forever go in peace, because I believe we will be ending in approximately like 2 minutes. So any last questions, any last super chats, whatever, send them now. Let's see. Joe Biden for nursing home. I agree. Would any candidate potentially pick Pence for VP? No. No way. The only reason Trump picked Pence was because of the evangelical factor. I mean, Trump, he doesn't have that problem much anymore because the abortion stuff, that solidified it. DeSantis, not really. Tim Scott's openly running as an evangelical candidate. So, Nikki Haley's up there. I just don't see anybody. That's the only reason Trump picked him, because the evangelical factor. Thoughts on Marine Le Pen 2027? Is she actually going to run again? How old is she? For France. She's 54. I'm not as old as I thought. But yeah, I think she's going to run. Or I hope she runs again. Because it's looking like that France is an open collapse for the 5th time this week. So, yeah. All right. Thank you so much to everybody that tuned in. If you did enjoy the stream, smash the like button down below. Subscribe. Share with your friends. Hit that little bell. Follow the Twitter accounts in the description down below. And, of course, join the channel today. Again, folks, we're probably going to do more streams more frequently. Again, all the support is greatly appreciated. And we'll see you guys in the next live stream.